So I'm excited for this conversation. Now that I have the two of you, I can leave Aaron out of this for a second, though he was absolutely going to apply to this statement I'm going to make, which is that very few people are representative of an AI brain like the two of you are in real life. So it's an incredibly interesting matrix to know both of you very well and work with you on a daily basis, because it's amazing to see how the limits of the way our minds work can be pushed to the absolute max. So that's how I will intro both of you. Obviously, everyone knows David. To give everyone a little bit of background on Cynthia from my perspective, and then I'm going to let her tell her story, and to give everyone an understanding of why we're here with her today, is Cynthia's existence in the world of sports and predictive analytics and AI is exceptionally unique from the perspective of not only does she code her own analytics models, but she also tells the story of how that data applies in a digestible narrative manner that is easy for humans to understand. And that larger mission aligns so perfectly with what David has built thus far with ASM and how we plan to bring it to the larger world, which is that data and the use of AI needs to be A, ownable, B, quantifiable, and C, fun and dynamic, and allow for anyone to use it and anyone to experience it, and even more importantly, for anyone to be able to evolve it. And so that is just sort of setting the table of why we wanted to bring Cynthia into the FIFA AI League experience first. And then, as I know some of you have suspected on Twitter, we will obviously be working with her on other properties. From our perspective, it's really important as we build AI games in the metaverse and as that starts to evolve, that we really tie it to storytelling in a manner that is traditional, and that we are able to onboard people and give them perspectives into games, both sports games and both AI games as we build them, that make it interesting and exciting for their introduction to this world. So that's my long intro. It wasn't supposed to be that long, but it was. So Cyn, I want to take everyone through and allow you to tell your story, because it's absolutely fascinating. And I won't ask you if you've ever thought about modeling out how someone could do what you do in their career, if you need to have certain experience and certain specific jobs to be able to do it. But I can attest to that your experience is so unique that it aligns with how unique you are and how you do your job. So let's go back and start with, how on earth do you feel like you got here from the perspective of what were you interested in as a child?
So I thought I was gonna be a doctor when I was a child. So that's first of all, to take a step back and to even be included with minds like yours and everyone on this panel, and like what I know from like the limited interactions I've even seen, like some of the tech stuff with David and with Aaron is just like so next level that I don't even feel like I should be considered in the same realm, but I'm glad and happy to be here nonetheless. So thank you for all of that, and thank you for including me in all of this. I think that, in general, the reason I wanted to be a doctor is because I thought I could like help people and fix people and make them happy. And then I realized that's like kind of not what doctors do. So, I took a little bit of a left turn. I started med school, then I dropped out, and then I went into banking and private equity. I got a chance to like take really weird things and make financial models out of them, and that was pretty cool, and I really enjoyed doing that. I felt it was creative. I'm a quant brain. I felt it was very creative, and I got a chance to kind of explore in a different way. And then I should back up one more step, because I am the daughter of an engineer. My dad worked on F1 engines. So I'm from Michigan originally, and we lived in Luxembourg growing up. So just so that the connection to soccer, to football can be sort of, everyone can kind of see at least where I started being interested in that. So growing up in Europe was a lot of fun. Obviously, like any expat, like we saw a lot of Manchester United games, but at that time Ryan Giggs was playing and his wife's name was Cynthia. So like I felt like, that was kind of my reason for liking it. Anyways, Banking. Then I went back to business school. In business school, I cold emailed the CFO of the NFL at the time, asked for a job in the middle of business school because I didn't, like every other person that goes to B school, like you think you're kind of cocky and you're like, yeah, whatever, I can go back to private equity if I want to. Like all these things that later you like are embarrassed that you ever even thought, but whatever. So I emailed him and it kind of began my journey down the NFL path. I worked in the league office on some pretty big projects like, the season inventory restructuring, which now is known as the 17-game season. At that time, there was no teams in LA, and was about bringing two teams, one AFC and one NFC, to the LA market because of the way the TV distribution deals were done, et cetera. So I worked on these big financial deals, and then meeting with a competition committee, which is a really important part of the NFL's business model. Old coaches, old players. We watched a bunch of film, we ate snacks, we sat in dark rooms, and like they swear and it's really fun and they're really passionate about it. And it made me pretty passionate about it. So I thought I would potentially get into something around cap or, work with a team. But then I discovered, so I went back to school for my second year, my MBA to finish. And I kind of discovered that I was really good at like figuring out how a player could impact a game and how teams could be more playoff eligible longer if there was a better quality of play. So it kind of led me down an analytics path. I ended up getting a master's of predictive analytics. I did a whole bunch of different sports models throughout my time adding that, both at Northwestern and kind of just started building out these like the beginnings of a model. And then I taught myself how to code. So I'm not anywhere near the coder of anyone listening to this, I'm sure. I'm a hacker, and I hack for like, analytics of sports sake. So I started to really get into computer vision, which was awesome. It really allowed me to measure things because I didn't trust other people's measurements. I didn't know what, someone's quote unquote grade for something was. I didn't know how it was derived. So I couldn't, I don't know, maybe the lack of trust thing. That could be something to explore with my therapist. But, ultimately, I started to create these models, and then I took a path through Disney and like larger scale, big tech deals. I was more on the tech side for a while, tech acquisitions, purchasing, big scale Disney strat planning style stuff. And then went to ESPN, and then Paul DePodesta, the guy from Moneyball fame, gets hired by the Cleveland Browns. ESPN doesn't know how to talk about Moneyball for football on TV. And then, I randomly got a chance to do that. And that was kind of the beginning of my TV part of my career. So like going through these like big data models and kind of figuring things out and like saying yes to things that seemed a little weird, and and figuring it out was kind of my path to where I am now.
Do you feel like at the beginning because there really was a point where, and still just generally in data analytics, definitely in American football, but we're obviously seeing it across the World Cup, there are so few people that are really analyzing the game from a deep statistical and predictive manner. Obviously, there are the straight lines and sort of the betting angle of what people are putting up and out, and that's where a lot of people are going more to make bets. Do you feel like when you first got into this opportunity, of Moneyball being a great example of like how can we start to find storylines, was that your way in? Did you feel like it needed to have more of a narrative to it because just spitting out numbers was not digestible? Did you evolve it by way of starting to think about how you could make certain projections, but then just simply needing to actually explain what you were doing behind the scenes? How did it evolve into now it's such a narrative component even in the media? How did it begin?
For me, it began mostly because what I was really noticing was like nothing is new, right? Like the idea of sometimes it's called like in football quality control. In soccer, you have a lot of different people who are analyzing different components of the game, assistant coaches, like just the title hasn't always been there, but the theory has been around for a while. But the real difference is technology, the evolution of the technologies that allow people to gain these insights and the speed with which they're able to be to be revealed. That's what's changed, because you could do these deep studies, but you have to use the data, right? USA played today, USA play again Friday in my time zone at least. So you have to be able to execute something on a short order, and the reality is you want to also be able to take some of your own bias out of it, right? Like, a coach is a coach for a reason. They have really good instincts. They know what they're supposed to be doing. They know when a substitution is a good idea or not, etc. And as they're going through these things, like, sometimes we have like logical fallacies. We just believe something or whatever, but you want to have something that you can compare to that is less biased. And if the technology can allow us to do that at a faster pace, then it's a real advantage for the teams that know how to do it. And that being said, since nothing is new, the problem is if you're, sometimes I get frustrated when I hear it on TV, because, they kind of say, even today, actually, I love the Fox's coverage of the World Cup here, but, they say something like, and we say it in football all the time, teams who win their first match, they are 48% getting out of the making it to the next round, right? And that's actually kind of like, it's not true. Like, the reality is that in the past, 46% or whatever the number was have gotten through to the next round, right? It's not necessarily predictive. That's the past, because if you lose your first game to Germany, it's much different than losing your first game to Qatar. Like, there's, you have to factor in who are the opponents, what was the situation, is a draw a really big problem or not, right? Like, obviously American TV, we care about that draw. So long story short, you hear this, and I think the thing is people understanding, and in everyone's careers, they're using data insights more in their regular parlance. Truck drivers will do it with analyzing fuel economy, things like that, right? So everyone's using it more often. And as that's becoming more mainstream now, there's some things that are a little nuanced, and whoever's better at like explaining those nuances so you can really just feel comfortable with the data, I think that's where the advantage is. And I think like being a translator is probably like that's what I think I add to it. I'm not the best coder. I'm not the, like, I don't write my code's ugly, like, it's disgusting, but I know how to use it enough to be able to get the data to be, the validity and the fidelity of the data is good. And I can tell what it means on a time scale that makes sense relative to what it needs to do, which is predict games.
Totally. So, David, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just got a question. So in your career in this space, we've obviously seen the tools for data analytics sort of advance and the technology in that space grow. What about the tools for gathering the data? As somebody who has done a lot of this kind of stuff for different purposes over my career. The old adage, shit in, shit out, is never more true with data analytics. So,
oh God, for sure. Yeah. So as you're seeing, so obviously with the NFL specifically tracking data and next gen stats was a big investment by the NFL. Obviously, we see a lot of like AWS now sponsoring it. It's it's made on AWS platforms, etc. So they're trying to monetize it, but it was a giant initiative. I actually think, at least for football, player health and safety was a massive reason why all of these things, they could justify the cost to gather the data, because now you have, you want your quarterback, you want your players to be as healthy as possible for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is like the quality of the gameplay, right? So it was, it's better for the human beings involved. It's better for the sport. It's kind of like a win-win-win-win-win. So in all of that, it's massively expensive. So in order to justify that, I think that a lot of these like, the reason why it's growing is because a lot of companies, I know soccer's made big investments, and wearable technology has come a really long way in recent years. And so I think like the bigger investments that people have made it a lot easier for us to like at least gather data that you can contextually use at a, we get it real time for the NFL. So that's, we're not quite there real time in terms of like telling stories with it, but we're there, where we get it real time.
That's awesome.
Actually, that's an amazing question, David. And also it's really fascinating in what we're talking about with Cynthia in relation to ASM, but also beyond, is Cynthia's already begun building our data model around the prediction game that will ultimately be the FIFA game, and obviously ultimately be AFA. And what's really interesting is we're going to be able to gather the data from the root of the data and be able to understand how people are playing the game, how people are training their teams, how the game is going to advance by way of the intelligence within the avatars advancing. So I think we're at a really interesting frontier of how we can apply data analytics and storytelling to games that obviously don't attach to a physical athlete, which makes gathering of the data a lot more complicated.
Yeah, thoughtfulness as, like, you guys are doing a really great job of anticipating. See, in the past, and anyone who has like a corporate job, like the first thing that goes out in deals is like, they're like, okay, fine, it's too hard for us to we're not going to build something new to gather data, so we'll just do with what we got. And you're like, no, that's so terrible. Like, this make it harder on the back end, right? So that's like, for whatever reason in deal making, people are like, we'll throw the data out, we don't care. But the fact that you guys are anticipating it ahead of time will not only make it feel like more like exciting, but also there's a level of, like, the word I'm gonna use is like fairness, right? Like this transparency of like, I'm playing a game, there's some random generator like in it. I don't know exactly how it works, but I know that, it feels fair, right? It's like when you go to the slot machine, that it's a random number. Somebody somewhere decides the frequency with which someone wins, and it feels fair because everybody has the equal chance to pull the slot machine down, right? Not likening it to the simplicity of slot machine, but the feeling of, there's no one duping you with some tricky algorithm that you could never, or that someone smart could just fit, like figure out.
Well, that's what they tell us, at least, right?
Right.
We don't know if that's the case, but it's definitely, both ways of thinking about it are exceptionally exciting. So no, I love that point, and it's true. So Cyn, you've spent a lot of time obviously in American football. I know you've done a lot of golf. I know you have done a lot of other sports. In particular, with building this model for the World Cup, which I'm going to take credit for because you built it for us specifically. Mm-hmm. And we're really excited about that, and we're exceptionally honored for that. Obviously, it's the first kind of run through this World Cup with it. When you went into this one, what are some of the factors that you thought were most important to consider as you tried to figure out the complexities of the nuances of this World Cup, and obviously how the teams have come together?
So my world is about like phone a friend, right? Like, you should always ask people smarter than you to like help look at your stuff to figure out, like, are my insights, like, I know, like, I went through, and to me, this model's a lot more like basketball. American, like, NFL is not particularly helpful in this, like, but basketball, because players play both offense and defense, and one player can make a huge difference. A swing of a player can make a huge difference. The good news is soccer players in general play tons and tons of games. So there was a lot of ways to look at, both the individual player as well as kind of the dynamics of, like, okay, this team has great defense, this team has great offense, and you can look through a historical context to say, how often does, an offense of this magnitude beat a defense of this magnitude, et cetera, et cetera. So you're getting like a good sense of, the historical context of how it has played out in the past, which is, to me, so the best way I have found to model any of this stuff is to take basically a doppelganger search. So you kind of model out the strengths and weaknesses of each particular player, each particular system of, how games go. Like, what's the flow? Is this a team that, today look at it, the game, the USA game was interesting because the way that the injuries were working out, it was very interesting, like time flow. I call that pace. There is probably a better word, but I call it pace. So the pace, and then the offensive versus defensive efficiencies in that is how I sort of started looking at it. And then, of course, the phone a friend. I'm very fortunate because in my career, I've met a lot of people who have had these incredible they're responsible for picking players, or they're responsible for, having a hand at selecting teams in some sort. So I vetted it with some of my very higher level friends to make sure my logical insights made sense, because, predictions they're only, like you said, as good as with the insights and the information that you have going into it. And I felt comfortable with the amount of information because of how many games are played. And then I felt comfortable with my level of insights because I asked people who actually did it. I cheated, it's a hack.
So I had a question. It looks like Rob also had a question from the audience that's similar to mine. Just asking about, how does the environment play into the predictions? Is it something that you take into account across all the sports that you're building models for? So the weather and the elevation and the humidity, that sort of stuff?
All of those things I can factor in. I will acknowledge, those things are, that's actually one of the first and best things to model. People looked tired. You're right. That's 100%, that's in there. The thing that I cannot model, and I have, this is a limitation of my model for sure. I don't Qatar is an interesting environment in general. I don't really want to get into that part, but I don't know how it feels to be there. There's a lot of, I just model everything as though it's a neutral site. I don't know if some people are more comfortable or not. I can't figure out the psychology of that. And I don't, perhaps someone could, but that's something that I disregarded it because I have no good sense of how to do that one.
So it is an interesting thing in data analytics you have to be careful of is what data to leave in or out, whether it's statistically significant or not, and whether it might skew the results because the data is not actually that relevant, but does have a large impact on the outcome of the result. Those are some landmines you have to look out for, in my experience.
Yeah. See, to me, the interesting, so I create, there's never just one model, right? As the tournament evolves, I'll see which one's tracking better or not. There's basically, I think of it how many levers can I pull and which ones can I modify as it's going along. It's tracking more like X. It's these things seem to be influential factors and these don't, right? So the reality is that as it goes along, I'll see which one, I've got about 5 different environments that I'm kind of seeing which one it tracks most like.
Makes sense. So that old physicist joke about the spherical cow, that you've got to reduce it to its most simplest components first before you can do any reliable analytics on it.
Yep. The good news is that I could simulate the last World Cup. Now, again, there are different conditions. It's the time of year is even different. Everything, there's a lot of differences, but you can use the recipe, if you will, and apply it to the and pretend that last time hadn't happened yet, just to see what would happen. And it was in pretty good shape. So I felt confident after going through that I was at least in good enough shape to it's defensible and something I'm proud of. I'm never going to put out something that I'm not proud of.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. You know what I'm really proud of? On that note, just to take that word, I think it's really, I'll speak for myself because I am not a good predictor for the World Cup. In fact, I don't know much about, I kind of just pick countries that I've had great experiences in as my supporting system. So it's been really interesting to look at what you factor into these games. And frankly, in my attempt to try to compete with you, I'm failing miserably because I will say that since this is a first run of this model, you're doing incredibly well because you're currently ranked 581. I'm ranked down in the 2000s. So it's interesting to see. Obviously, it's very early, and so you can't determine exactly how you're performing overall. But is there anything that you were surprised to see so far, or that you felt was something as you were building this out that you were surprised to see as a really interesting insight?
Yeah, I mean, well, the good news is that I built it without listening to a lot of like TV people commentary on it. Like, I went to my sources, but I didn't want to like, you know, just because someone's a great speaker doesn't mean they know, like, listen, football, American football, be careful who you listen to. Like some of it be great speakers, but what are they saying? But long story short, it's like I was pretty happy that like it came out that while Brazil was the favorite for me, just like it did for Vegas as well, that it was far closer than in past World Cups, which has tended to be, now that I've started to listen to the commentary, has tended to be, what has played out in, what they believe as well. So the eye test, if you will, seems to be matching that. My models were quite down on Argentina, and we'll have to see about that. Obviously, age being something that's like interesting to a point, right? Like, this, I think it's more like of a ding rather than an uptick. Because if it was an uptick, then the U.S. would win because they're young. But it's more of like okay, this is a concern, especially in these conditions. So we'll have to see how that one plays out. And then some of my I think my model really liked Belgium. We'll have to see how it all goes. But I have been listening to the commentary now, and the people who I do trust and whose opinions I do really think are great, and even thought that before. Like I said, I didn't want to muddy my own thinking. I wanted to keep as unbiased as possible making it. But now that the models are done and we'll see what happens, it makes me feel better that a lot of what I have saw in the data is backed up by what at least some of the people who I think are the best analysts think. Makes me feel better.
Love it. I want to spin a question from the community because I think it's an interesting one. For a couple of reasons. Someone asked, where are these models, and will they ever be able to see them? And it's that's a fascinating question, because obviously I've known you for a long time, and I think the output of what you do is so fascinating, and your level of being right is fairly unfathomable. And so sometimes I wonder if you have a crystal ball or what exactly is going on behind it. And even in your putting together all of the work that you've done for us, and it's incredibly amazing to see how you simplify it. And for everyone, we're about to start putting out all of Cynthia's prediction videos, which will come in the next day or so, and they'll start to come before matches, so you can really see how she's looking at particular matches to come. But so I guess the question for you, Cyn, is these are things that I know you work on all day, every day, and you continue to plug at them and iterate them. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what a day in the life of your work is? Because I know it's really, even knowing you as well as I do, I know when you're working on your model, I just think of you in this science lab in the basement, and I just have no idea exactly what it is you're doing. So can you simplify it so that everyone knows how you build and evolve these and what goes into it?
Sure. First off, I would love to be able to put all my models out. I'm not a front-end developer, so, and I, working at the NFL Network, we do if you go to NFL.com, it's not we're not there yet. So eventually I'll put them out, but it's hard because I'd rather stay working on the back end stuff that I do and just keep doing that. I haven't had time to again, if you really, really want to do some front end developing, maybe in the future we can figure that out. But I love to put them out. I will eventually. I just need to get there time wise. But the end of the day, so for example, today was an interesting day because not only did I do so it's Thanksgiving in the States. So we have a lot, it shifts up my timeline faster than normal weeks. So usually when the games start, I turn on my model. So it takes the computer vision, it feeds in the all 22s, which is a vision of the field where all 22 players are visible at the same time. It's a static camera angle, which helps with the computer vision. Then it starts deriving all of the insights that I get from each game. Now, when that's going on, there's a billion errors, as you can imagine. So I go through the errors and then I watch each game at least twice because you have to understand context of the play. So you'll get these stats that pop out, but you also have to see for example, the play before, did the quarterback get sacked? And then that's why they're running the ball, even though it's 3rd and 17, something that would be illogical, right? So you have to go through and understand what's going on, track all of those things, enter that data into what goes into my model. So enter what's now the historical data into the model, and for each game. So each game, there's up to 16 games each week, so it can be a little daunting. And we haven't had the Monday night game that's happening tonight. So go through and do that. Now today, I also ended up doing yesterday's FIFA game and today's FIFA game and today's 2 games. So I now did 2 versions with soccer and I think I did like 11. I'm not quite through all of my football games yet either. So going through and entering into the historical context. So then what will happen is when I tell it to run, once I'm done with all the football games, NFL football games, when I go to bed tonight, I'll tell it to run, and it will play out the games for this next week. It will match up here, this type of offense versus this type of defense, et cetera, et cetera. And then, by the way, we have so many injuries this week. It's wild. This year's been bananas. So it'll be like, okay, replacement player X versus, the regular person Y and it'll play out. It will simulate the game, not dissimilar to the way like the Madden football game simulates the football game for you, and see what are the most likely outputs. So, doppelganger. So the defenses that look like this versus offenses that look like this. This is the outcome, and this is the distribution of the outcomes. So then as we play the game 1 million times, then what is the most likely score and what's the most likely production from individual players? And that will spit out tomorrow morning. Same thing will happen. I haven't run everything. It's easier for me to do it kind of all at once because, again, I'm a terrible coder. So I kind of, my process sort of is my process. So as soon as all of the first games are done, then the second games will go in. Now it's a little easier with these group play because, you kind of know who's playing, and you kind of know like equally nothing about them for these first 2 games. But then after that, we'll keep updating after each one.
It's so dope. I love it.
It's a lot.
What kind of infrastructure are you running these similar? Just my personal edification.
Yeah, so I'm like a company shill here, but AWS has been very helpful to me. I also do like a lot of Python. I love relational databases. I know I'm old school with that, but give me a little bit of Hive, we're good. And I obviously my computer vision goes through a Python shell because I'm old. I'm sure there's better ways to do it.
No, I'm a massive advocate for Python, and obviously it's massive in the AI space as well.
Yeah, Python's really the only thing that I can I don't want to. Let me be honest with you. I don't want to learn a new one. I feel like the amount of time it would take me to learn.
Did we lose Cynthia, or am I gone?
We might have lost her.
Oh, no.
In the meantime, while we lost her, this is a perfect time to commit her to something. One of the other, while she's not here to say no, just kidding, but one of the other questions from the community is, oh, there she is. I'll let her back in. Let's see. Sin, can you hear us?
Yeah, she's gone again.
Her dog probably ate her phone. What I was gonna say, maybe she'll drop back off and come back. So maybe close Twitter and come back in. This could be an Elon thing. We can't confirm or rely at the moment, so we just have to go with it. One of the community questions is ASM looking to work on some AI solutions for statistical analysis for the likes of people like Cynthia? And it's really interesting. If Cyn can hear me, she probably can, so I'm going to let you back in. We've talked actually about that at length, which is what can ASM ultimately come in and collaborate with her on in relation to her models and how she runs real-time predictions. So Cyn, can you hear us now? Okay, she probably can hear us, but we can't hear her. So David, I think that's a really interesting place. And until Cynthia comes back, David, let's wrap it up with you and I. I know you're in the weeds, and it's amazing to see on the development of the FIFA game. And obviously, we're in deep development on AFA as well. Give me your most favorite, nerdiest sort of area of passion as you're looking at the AI and what is possible for how players can use it. That's a broad question, but I'm just trying to, I want you to give me something like really specific and interesting that is kind of making your brain tick at the moment as you deeply build these games.
So for me personally, this is the thing in regards to sports that I'm most excited about. And I've got a background, I love sports and I love gaming. I've never loved sports games. And I've been on kind of the other end of the spectrum from each other. I grew up playing rugby, been a massive fan of motorsports my whole life. But what I'm excited about is that those two things with much better data modeling and predictive algorithms and maths and the awesome stuff that Cynthia is doing, and then on the simulation side, the artificial intelligence simulation side, the stuff that we're doing, as that stuff starts to converge, you can create this whole new classification of simulation and fantasy sports games that have never existed before, where you can have players tracking real life, AI players tracking real life players and performing in the games as they would in real life, and actually playing the games out in 3D spaces, whether that be on your phone or in VR or whatever it might be. That's the sort of thing that excites me, is the merging of those two worlds in an immersive way that hasn't existed before.
Yeah, it's amazing. And thinking even of the VR capabilities down the line of being able to be in the middle of those games is wild. Obviously, that's down the line and not what we're focused on right now. But to think about it, it'll be crazy to see the perspectives of a game that we haven't been able to see as a traditional viewer.
Yeah. I mean, it's closer than you think, though.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that.
We'll make sure it's closer than we even think.
Yeah, you can see what's going on in the lab at Oldest State Machine.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what's going on in the lab at Oldest State Machine. Yeah.
And yeah, it's incredibly exciting, and it's why we're just mind blown about what we're seeing behind the scenes and what we'll bring out to everyone soon too. Sin, can you unmute?
Yep, I think so.
Oh, you're back.
It was so weird because every time I would hit unmute, I would kick me off.
Well, that's Twitter for you. We'll just stay on the roller coaster. Okay, well, I want to be conscious of everyone's time and Sin, of course, yours too. So I want to wrap it up by saying we'll be back, and that Cynthia is going to be putting out tons of predictions for the World Cup as we go, and she'll be with us for the foreseeable future doing tons of really cool stuff, and we'll all be active on Twitter, so you can ask us anything you want. And Sin, we so appreciate the time and your energy and your effort and your absolute brilliance, and there truly is no one like you. I saw a comment the other day of someone saying like, oh, well, who are the other international people that do this? And I can truly say there is nobody that does what you do, and so we are absolutely honored for you to be on this ride with us, and so excited to see how you continue to make all of us better as we go.
The honor is all mine. And let's be clear, I would like to be an international version of that because, as much as I like American sports, like it's kind of limiting. So I'm all in on this. I'll be the international person. We're good. I do, I did grow up in Europe, so I feel like I have a little bit of a tie there.
You absolutely have a tie. And you're right. We'll take everything global and we'll also take it into the metaverse. So thank you for being with us. And David, thank you for your brilliance as always. And thank you for everyone for joining us, and we'll be back soon.
Thanks, team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.